Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The charred remnants of what was once a settlement lay scattered across the barren landscape of Taran 4. Smoke still rose from several structures, twisting into the hazy atmosphere. The attack had been swift, merciless. Jonathan Reed stepped carefully through the debris, his boots crunching on the mixture of ash and metallic fragments. His breath came in measured intervals through his filtration mask. A well-worn device with a hairline crack running along its left side. An imperfection that occasionally whistled when he exhaled too forcefully. The emergency beacon had gone silent hours ago. As a contract engineer, Jonathan was used to responding to distress signals, but something about this one had felt different from the moment he'd received the coordinates. Too urgent, too precise. "Command, this is Reed," he said into his comm. "Settlement's a total loss. Raider attack pattern consistent with previous sites. No survivors located." He paused, waiting for the static-filled acknowledgement before continuing his sweep. The eastern quadrant had suffered the worst damage. Prefab shelters had been reduced to twisted frames, their contents scattered and burned. Jonathan moved methodically, his scanner picking up nothing but residual heat signatures, until it didn't. A sharp ping from his device drew his attention to what appeared to be a storage facility, or what remained of one. The outer walls had collapsed, but something beneath the rubble was emitting a faint signal. "Command, I'm picking up an anomaly." Investigating. He moved debris piece by piece, revealing what appeared to be a container unlike anything he'd seen in standard colonial inventory. Oblong, nearly 3 meters in length, its surface gleamed with a metallic sheen that hadn't dulled despite the destruction around it. Sharp conical protrusions extended from its surface at regular intervals, giving it the appearance of some ancient defensive weapon rather than a storage unit. And then he heard it, breathing. Soft, rhythmic, unmistakably alive. Jonathan dropped to his knees, fingers searching for an access panel, a release mechanism, anything. The container's design was sophisticated, secured by interlocking mechanisms that seemed deliberately complicated. This wasn't standard quarantine protocol. This was containment. "Hello," he called, pressing his ear against the cool metal surface. "Is someone in there?" The breathing quickened. As his fingers worked the locking mechanisms, a memory surfaced. The mining facility on Ceres, where he'd found 3 workers trapped in a collapsed shaft. He'd ignored the supervisor's risk assessment and gone in alone. He'd saved them, yes, but the instability he'd caused had collapsed an adjacent tunnel, killing 2 technicians who'd been safely positioned before his intervention. The commendation and the disciplinary note had arrived the same day. With a final click and the hiss of releasing pressure, the container's seam appeared along its length. Jonathan hesitated only briefly before pulling it open. 2 figures lay inside, curled against each other in the narrow space. Females, humanoid in general appearance, but unmistakably alien. As the light hit them, they stirred, blinking against the sudden brightness. The taller one moved first, unfurling from her protective position around the smaller figure. Her skin was a pale blue that seemed to shimmer slightly in the filtered sunlight. Her movements precise and deliberate as she assessed Jonathan with unnervingly direct eyes. The younger one trembled, pressing herself against the container's inner wall, her wide eyes darting between Jonathan and the devastation visible beyond him. "Who kept you in there?" Jonathan asked, extending a hand that neither took. The blue-skinned woman regarded him with a cold stare that sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. "You should not have opened this," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected weight. "I saved you," Jonathan replied, confusion creeping into his tone. The smaller one whimpered, drawing her knees tighter to her chest. The taller one's expression didn't change as she climbed out of the container, helping the younger one follow. She stood at full height, nearly matching Jonathan's 6-foot frame, her posture suggesting both strength and wariness. "You have made a mistake," she said, and did not thank him. The wasteland stretched before them, an endless expanse of dust and scattered rock formations, beneath a merciless sun. Jonathan led the way toward the abandoned relay station he knew lay 20 kilometers to the north, checking his navigation device occasionally to confirm their course. The sisters followed several paces behind, the elder maintaining a careful distance. "Do you have names?" Jonathan asked, breaking the silence that had persisted for nearly an hour. "Kyera," the blue-skinned woman answered after a pause. She nodded toward her companion. This is Lena. I'm Jonathan Reed, contract engineer. I responded to the distress signal from the settlement. We know what you are, Carrie replied, her tone flat. Lena hadn't spoken a word since they'd left the ruins. She kept her gaze lowered, occasionally glancing nervously at the horizon, as if expecting something to materialize from the heat waves that distorted the distance. Were you prisoners? Jonathan tried again. We were isolated. For safety. Whose safety? Yours. Her eyes flicked to his, then away. From your kind, Jonathan frowned. From me? I just rescued you. It was necessary, she said simply. Lena stumbled suddenly, her foot catching on an exposed root. Jonathan reacted instinctively, reaching out to steady her. She tensed at his touch but didn't pull away, her eyes meeting his for the first time. Dark, almost luminous, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement, before Carrie gently pulled her back. Were they keeping you as slaves? Jonathan asked again as they resumed walking. Carrie shook her head. Not from... For before Jonathan could press further, Lena made a strange choke sound. He turned to find tears streaming down her face, though she made no attempt to wipe them away. She simply stared ahead, crying silently as they walked across the wasteland. They made camp as dusk approached, sheltering in the shadow of a massive rock formation. Jonathan distributed emergency rations from his pack, which the sisters accepted without comment. The silence stretched between them as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. You still haven't told me what you are, Jonathan said finally, watching Carrie across the small heating unit he'd activated. Would understanding change anything? She asked, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. It might help me decide where to take you. Who to contact. We need to reach the relay station, Care replied. After that, we have our own destination. The perimeter alarm on his scanner activated, a soft, insistent beeping indicating movement nearby. He extinguished the heating unit immediately, plunging them into relative darkness. Stay here, he whispered, drawing his sidearm. Don't move. He crept to the edge of their shelter, peering into the gloom. 3 figures moved across the wasteland, their shapes outlined against the starlit sky. Human, heavily armed, moving with practiced caution. Raiders, he breathed, ducking back. If we stay quiet, they should pass by. Carrie's expression tightened. They've already changed course. They're coming this way. How do they sense us? Care cut him off. It's beginning already. A voice called from the darkness. We know you're in there. Come out slowly. Jonathan made a quick assessment. I'm coming out, he called back, holstering his weapon. I'm unarmed. Just a contract engineer passing through. He stepped into the open, hands raised, squinting against the sudden glare, as the raiders trained their illuminators on him. 3 men stood in a loose semicircle, faces obscured by scarves and goggles. Alone, the central figure demanded. Jonathan hesitated. Yes, he lied. Following a distress beacon. Found nothing but ruins. The raider to the left shifted his weight. Check his pack, he told his companion. Engineers always have good tech. As the 3rd raider approached, Jonathan noticed a subtle change in the group's dynamic. The 2 remaining raiders angled toward each other, their postures becoming more aggressive. Why should you get first pick? The leader suddenly snapped. Because I'm the one who spotted them, the other responded, voice rising. I'm in charge here. You're in charge because we let you be, the second growled, turning fully toward his leader. The raider approaching Jonathan paused, looking back. What the hell are you 2 doing? In that moment of distraction, Jonathan struck. A quick jab to the throat sent the nearest raider staggering back. Jonathan seized the man's weapon and dove for cover as the other 2, seemingly forgotten their quarrel, opened fire. Kyrie! Lena! Run! He shouted, returning fire to provide cover. The sisters emerged, but instead of fleeing, Kyrie moved with deliberate steps toward the raiders. Lena followed closely, her earlier timidity replaced by an unsettling calm. Get back, Jonathan called, but they ignored him. As Carrie approached, the raiders' attention shifted entirely to her. Their firing became erratic, then ceased. In the sudden silence, Jonathan could hear them arguing, their voices rising to shouts. She's mine, the leader bellowed, shoving his companion with enough force to send him sprawling. I saw her first, the other screamed, launching himself at his leader. The 3rd raider recovered from Jonathan's strike, stood watching his companions with growing agitation. His hands trembled as he raised his weapon, aiming first at one, then the other. "Stop it!" he shouted. When they ignored him, continuing their increasingly violent struggle, he fired, not at Jonathan or the sisters, but at his own companions. The shot caught the leader in the shoulder, spinning him around. The wounded man stared in disbelief before rage contorted his features and he charged. Jonathan watched in horror as the three men fell upon each other with murderous intent. Their weapons were discarded in favor of knives, then abandoned entirely as they resorted to fists and teeth. Blood darkened the sand as their savagery increased beyond all reason. Carrie returned to where Jonathan crouched, her expression grim. "We should go while they're distracted." "Distracted?" Jonathan echoed, staring at the brutal scene. "They're killing each other." "Yes," Carrie acknowledged, "and soon only one will remain. We need to be far away by then." They gathered their supplies and slipped away into the darkness, leaving the sounds of combat behind. "That wasn't normal," he said when they were well away. "People don't just lose control like that." "They do in our presence," Care replied. "Always." "What are you?" Jonathan demanded, stopping abruptly. "What kind of weapon did I unleash?" Care met his gaze steadily. "We are meant to be peacekeepers." It failed. Peacekeepers? That was the opposite of peace back there. The project failed. We were designed to emit a psychoactive field that would suppress aggression. Instead, we amplify it, exponentially. Jonathan stared at her. "Those men, they didn't stand a chance, did they?" "They were already violent," Care said. "Predators. We merely accelerated their nature." Lena spoke, her voice so soft Jonathan barely heard it. "It gets worse. The longer we stay, the worse it becomes." A chill ran down Jonathan's spine as he remembered the container with its multiple locks and reinforced structure. It hadn't been a prison, it had been a safeguard. The following day brought new terrain, a vast field of razor-sharp obsidian formations jutting from the ground like teeth. They picked their way carefully through the natural maze, each step requiring concentration. "How much farther to the relay station?" Carrie asked, helping Lena navigate a treacherous passage. "Another day's journey," Jonathan replied, consulting his navigation device. "Maybe less if we maintain this pace." His mask whistled with each breath now, the crack having widened overnight. "You've been quiet," Carrie observed. "I'm processing," Jonathan replied curtly. "It's not every day you learn you've rescued weapons of mass psychological destruction. That's an oversimplification. Is it? Those raiders tore each other apart because you two walked by." Carrie stepped over a glittering black shard, her movements precise. "You've saved people before. The savior complex is written in your every action." Jonathan glanced at her sharply. "What do you know about that?" "I know the type. A memory surfaced, the colony on Terrace Prime where a virus had ravaged the population. Jonathan had breached quarantine to rescue a family trapped in the hot zone. He'd gotten them out, administered the experimental antiviral. 2 had survived. The 3rd had become a carrier, infecting 3 more sectors before being identified. 37 dead from his mercy. "I do what needs doing," he said finally. "Sometimes it works out. And when it doesn't," Care pressed, "then I live with it." Jonathan noticed movement in the distance, something large shifting behind a formation. "We're not alone," he said quietly, reaching for his weapon. Before he could stand, a massive form burst from behind the rocks. A sand wraith, predatory species native to the planet's wastelands. 8 meters of armored exoskeleton and razor-sharp appendages charged toward them with terrifying speed. "Run!" Jonathan shouted, firing several rounds that ricocheted harmlessly off the creature's carapace. They scattered, Jonathan dragging Lena with him behind a tall obsidian spire, while Carrie darted in the opposite direction. The wraith skidded to a halt, its sensory organs swiveling as it tried to track its suddenly divided prey. "Stay here," Jonathan told Lena, positioning her in a narrow crevice. "Don't move." He circled around, trying to locate Carrie while keeping the creature in view. The wraith had chosen to follow her, its massive form weaving through the obsidian with surprising agility. Jonathan moved parallel to its path, looking for a vulnerability in its armor. He found Carrie backed against a sheer wall of black glass, the wraith advancing with predatory patience. Jonathan aimed for the joint where its primary hunting limb connected to the body, a small target, but one of the few weak points in its natural armor. The shot struck true. The wraith let out a shrieking roar as its limb hung useless. It whirled with unexpected speed, focusing its rage on this new threat. Jonathan fired again, but the creature was moving too erratically. The shot missed, striking harmlessly against its armored head. The wraith charged, and Jonathan threw himself sideways, rolling across the sharp ground. Pain lanced through his side as an obsidian shard sliced through his jacket and into flesh. He came up firing, emptying his weapon into the creature's underside as it passed. The wraith crashed into a formation, shattering the brittle obsidian. It thrashed in pain, its movements becoming more frenzied as Jonathan's shots found their mark in the softer tissue beneath its armor. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, the creature collapsed, its limbs twitching in death throes. Jonathan slumped against a rock, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. "Kyre?" he called, voice strained. She emerged unharmed. "Here," she replied, moving to examine his wound. "Laena, I'm getting her." When they were reunited, Jonathan allowed Carrie to treat his injury, applying sealant from his medical kit to the gash. Her touch was clinical, efficient, but not unkind. "You risked yourself," she observed as she finished. "Again." "Force of habit," Jonathan replied through gritted teeth. "Even knowing what we are, you fought to protect us." He met her gaze. "Knowing what you are makes it more important, not less." Something changed in Kare's expression. A softening perhaps, or a reassessment. "The wound isn't deep, but we should reach the relay station before infection sets in." As they prepared to continue their journey, Lena approached the fallen wraith, studying it with a curiosity that seemed at odds with her earlier fear. "It was beautiful," she said softly, "in its way." Jonathan watched her, unsettled by the incongruity of her gentle touch against the creature that had nearly killed them. "We should go. There might be more." By the time they reached the edge of the field, the sun was setting. They made camp, Jonathan wincing as he eased himself to the ground, his wound protesting. "Why help us?" Carrie asked abruptly as they sat watching the stars appear. "Even after learning what we are?" Jonathan considered the question. "Because I made a choice when I opened that container. I don't walk away from my choices. Even bad ones? Especially those." Kyrie studied him in the dim light of their heating unit. "Your kind puzzles me. You destroy so easily, yet you risk yourselves to save even those who bring you harm." "That's being human," Jonathan replied. "Contradictions all the way down." As the night deepened, Jonathan found himself wondering which contradiction would prevail when they reached the relay station. His instinct to protect, or the darkness he could feel stirring within him the longer he remained in their presence. Morning brought the sight of a settlement on the horizon. Not the relay station, but a small outpost that hadn't appeared on Jonathan's navigation device. "That wasn't on my maps," he said, studying the cluster of structures through his scope. "We should avoid it," Jonathan decided. "Go around to the north." Lena, who had been watching the distant outpost with unusual intensity, shook her head. "Too late," she said. "They've seen us." A group of figures had emerged from the settlement, mounting vehicles and heading in their direction. "We can't outrun them on foot," Jonathan said, "and we can't fight that many." "We don't need to," Carrie replied, her tone grim. "They'll fight each other." Jonathan stared at her. "We can't let that happen again." "It's not a choice we make," she reminded him. "It's what we are." "I'll try to talk to them," he decided. "Stay back, both of you. As far back as possible." A weather-beaten man in his 50s stood in the back of the lead vehicle, rifle trained steadily on Jonathan's chest. "That's far enough," the man called. "Identify yourself." "Jonathan Reed, contract engineer." Responding to a distress call from the eastern settlement. "It was destroyed. I'm passing through to the relay station." The man studied him suspiciously. "Alone?" The lie came easily. "Yes." "Then why am I seeing 3 heat signatures on my scanner?" Jonathan's mind raced. "I have 2 traumatized survivors with me, women from the settlement." The man gestured to his companions to maintain their positions. "Show them." "They're not in good shape," Jonathan stalled. "Give me a minute to—" "Now," the man interrupted, "or we start assuming you're lying about everything else too." Jonathan turned, intending to warn Kyre and Lena to stay back, but they had already emerged from their hiding place. The reaction was immediate but subtle. A shifting among the settlers, uneasy glances exchanged, hands tightening on weapons. The leader's expression darkened as he studied the sisters. "They're not from any settlement I know." "They're not local," Jonathan confirmed, keeping his voice level. "Travelers. The settlement took them in before the attack." A younger man approached with a scanner extended. As he drew closer to Carrie, Jonathan saw the first sign of the effect. A nervous tick in the man's cheek, a tremor in his hand. "Sir," the young man called back, voice tight, "I'm getting strange readings." "Some kind of energy signature?" "Not like anything I've seen before." The leader frowned, approaching personally. As he did, Jonathan noticed the other settlers becoming more agitated, shifting positions, casting distrustful glances at each other. "We mean no harm," Jonathan said quickly. "We're just passing through." The leader had reached Kyrie now, studying her with narrowed eyes. "What are you?" "A traveler," she replied evenly. As he said, "Bullshit." The leader turned to Jonathan. "You know what they are. Tell me." "They're survivors," Jonathan insisted. "Nothing more." "Liar," one of the other settlers shouted suddenly. "They're the containment breach. The one from the alert." Several weapons were raised, pointing at the sisters. "Containment breach?" the leader repeated, looking back at his people. "Corporate alert," the settler explained, voice rising with agitation. "2 escaped test subjects. Extremely dangerous. Shoot on sight." "Stand down," the leader ordered, but his authority seemed to be slipping. Several of his people were arguing now, voices overlapping in growing discord. The leader turned back to Jonathan, expression hardening. "Last chance. What are they?" Before Jonathan could answer, the situation deteriorated. 2 settlers began shoving each other, an argument escalating with alarming speed. "You don't give the orders anymore," a woman shouted, raising her weapon. The first shot came from the periphery, one settler firing at another. Chaos erupted as the settlers turned on each other, all focus on the sisters forgotten in the explosion of violence. "Now," Jonathan said, grabbing both Carrie and Lena. "Run!" They fled, the sounds of combat fading behind them as they put distance between themselves and the self-destructing group. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Jonathan rounded on Kyrie. "That alert they mentioned, it's true, isn't it?" "You're escaped test subjects." Carrie didn't deny it. "Yes." "And you knew there would be alerts? Warnings?" "Yes." Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. "You should have told me. Would it have changed your decision to help us?" The question gave him pause. Would it have? Even now, knowing what they were, what they caused, he couldn't bring himself to abandon them. As they resumed their journey, Jonathan became aware of a growing tension within himself, a simmering irritation that flared at small provocations. Their influence was affecting him too, stoking embers of anger into potential flames. The difference was that he knew what was happening. He could fight it. For now. The canyon appeared suddenly, a jagged gash in the earth stretching at least 80 meters across. A precarious bridge, likely constructed by miners years ago, spanned the divide, its metal framework showing significant corrosion. "We'll have to cross," Jonathan said, eyeing the structure dubiously. "It's the only way to the relay station without adding days to our journey." "One at a time," Jonathan decided. "I'll go first to test it." The bridge swayed alarmingly as he made his way across, rusted metal groaning under his weight. When he finally reached the other side, he turned back. "Lena first," he called. Carrie nudged her sister forward, and the smaller figure began her crossing with surprising agility. She was halfway across when a terrible shriek of metal announced the failure of one of the main support cables. The bridge tilted sharply, sending Lena scrambling for purchase as planks began to fall away. "Run!" Jonathan shouted, starting back onto the failing structure. Lena froze, paralyzed by fear as the bridge continued to deteriorate. Without hesitation, Jonathan rushed forward, navigating the widening gaps. His feet slid on the unstable surface, hands grasping frantically at the swaying cables. He reached her just as the section beneath her started to give way. Their hands locked, fingers digging into each other's flesh with desperate strength. In one fluid motion, he scooped her up and ran for the edge, feeling the structure giving way with each step. They cleared the last meter in a desperate leap, landing roughly as the section behind them collapsed with a thunderous crash. Jonathan set Lena down, checking her for injuries before turning back to the canyon. Kyrie remained on the opposite side, alone on a narrowing ledge as the bridge's anchor points continued to crumble. "The whole thing's coming down," he called. "Is there another crossing?" "Not within a day's journey," she answered, her voice remarkably calm despite her precarious position. A section of the ledge beneath her feet broke away, forcing her to step back. Blood ran freely from a gash on her arm where she'd been struck by falling debris. Jonathan made his decision in an instant. "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." "No," she commanded. "It's too unstable." He ignored her, searching along the edge until he found a section of cable that remained partially attached. Testing its strength, he began to make his way back across the gap, using the hanging remnants of the bridge's structure for support. The drop below seemed to stretch into infinity, a darkness that promised no survival. When he reached the far ledge, Kari regarded him with disbelief. "You shouldn't have returned. You already told me I make mistakes." He extended his hand. "Let's go." She hesitated, then took his offered hand. The physical contact sent a jolt through him, not an electric shock, but something more primal. For an instant, he felt an overwhelming urge to shove her into the abyss, to eliminate the threat she represented. The intensity of the impulse terrified him, and he tightened his grip as if the physical connection might anchor his humanity. Her fingers dug into his forearm, the blue skin whitening around her knuckles. As their eyes met, something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. Her pulse hammered against his skin, her fear betrayed only by the slight tremor in her hand. Together they navigated the treacherous crossing, Jonathan maintaining a firm grip as they traversed the ruins of the bridge. The final section collapsed just as they leaped to safety, plunging into the abyss with an echoing crash. They lay on the ground, catching their breath. Lena approached cautiously, kneeling beside her sister to examine the wound on her arm. "You could have died," Carrie said finally, looking at Jonathan. "So could you," he replied. "That's generally how rescue works." "Why did you save us?" she asked, penetrating gaze fixed on his face, as if searching for some hidden motive. "The container, and now this." "Because you're alive," Jonathan answered simply. "That's enough reason?" Carrie shook her head slowly. "No, not enough. Not now. Not for us." "When I was crossing back to you," Jonathan said abruptly, "I wanted to kill you." "Just for a second. I wanted to push you into that canyon." Kyrie nodded, unsurprised. "It will get worse. The impulse will grow stronger, more frequent." "Is that what happened to the raiders? The settlers?" "Yes, but accelerated. Your resistance is unusual." As they prepared to continue their journey under the cover of darkness, Carrie suddenly spoke. "You don't understand. We aren't running away. We are returning." The relay station loomed against the night sky, a collection of angular structures and communication arrays. Jonathan forced the entry hatch and ushered the sisters inside, securing the door behind them. "We should be safe here for the night," he said, activating his light source. "I can try to establish communication with my company in the morning." Carrie moved through the space with curious familiarity, examining the defunct equipment while Lena stayed close to her side. Jonathan found the station's emergency power supply and managed to bring basic systems online. Lights, environmental controls, and rudimentary security. "Get some rest," he told them, indicating a small living quarter off the main control room. "I'll take first watch." Instead of retreating, Carrie remained in the control room, studying the communications array with focused intensity. "You said you were returning," Jonathan said, watching her. "Returning where? To what?" Carrie's fingers moved across a control panel, bringing dormant systems to life with practiced ease. "To those who made us? The people who locked you in that container? The people who created us," she corrected. "We were an experiment that failed, but we're still valuable to them. As weapons," Jonathan guessed, "as catalysts. They believe they can reverse our effect, create the peacekeeping force they originally intended. And if they can't reverse it, then they'll terminate us," she replied with clinical detachment, "as they should have done when we first failed." The casual acceptance of her own destruction disturbed Jonathan. "Is that what you want? To die? What I want is irrelevant. What's necessary is what matters." She turned to face him. "You understand necessity. I've seen it in your memories." "My memories? How could you?" "Physical contact," she explained. "The bridge. It works both ways. I saw the mining facility on Ceres, the orbital platform, the quarantine breach on Terrace Prime. Jonathan stepped back, unsettled. You were in my head. Not by choice. It happens when our fields interact directly with another consciousness. Her expression softened slightly. You carry much guilt for someone who has saved so many lives. The lives I saved don't balance against the ones I cost, Jonathan replied, the old weight settling on him again. An interesting moral calculus, Kyrie observed. Do you apply it to us as well? The lives lost against the lives we might save if the research succeeds? A warning ping from the perimeter sensors interrupted. Heat signatures were approaching, multiple contacts moving with purpose toward the station. Kyrie, he called softly, moving to wake Lena. We have company. They emerged alert, as if they hadn't been asleep at all. Carrie moved immediately to the observation port, her expression grim as she surveyed the approaching figures. Raiders, Jonathan confirmed, checking his weapon. Must have tracked us from the settlement. But something wasn't right. The raiders had reached the perimeter, but made no move to breach the entrance. Instead, they deployed in a perfect circle around the structure, vehicles positioned at equidistant points, lights trained on the building, but weapons lowered. They're not attacking, Jonathan observed. They're waiting. Carrie turned to him, her face unreadable in the dim light. They're not here for supplies or salvage. What then? Us. The single word hung in the air between them. They've come for us. Without explanation, Carrie moved to the entry hatch. Before Jonathan could stop her, she had disengaged the lock. What are you doing? He hissed. Confirming what I already know, she replied and stepped outside. Jonathan followed, weapon ready, but stayed in the doorway as Carrie approached the nearest raider. The man stepped forward, a tall, scarred figure whose elaborate armor marked him as the group's leader. Even in the harsh vehicle lights, Jonathan could see the man's posture, tense, defensive, and unmistakably afraid. Why have you come? Care asked, her voice carrying clearly. The leader's response was equally clear. You know why. Is she with you? Carrie's gaze remained steady. She is. A murmur ran through the assembled raiders, a ripple of unease. Jonathan scanned the perimeter, counting at least 20 armed individuals, all maintaining their distance as if the slender figure before them posed a greater threat than any weapon. What's happening? Jonathan demanded as Carrie returned. How do they know you? They don't, she answered, urging him back inside. Not specifically, but they know what we are. Before she could elaborate, a sound broke the tense silence. Laughter high and clear, coming from inside the station. Jonathan turned to see Lena standing in the main room, her head thrown back in unrestrained mirth that echoed off the metal walls. What's wrong with her? He asked. Care's expression darkened. It's beginning. The first shot came without warning, not directed at the station, but from one raider into the chest of another. The victim crumpled without a sound, and for a moment, a terrible stillness descended. Then chaos erupted. From his position at the observation port, Jonathan watched in horror as the raiders turned on each other with savage ferocity. Weapons discharged in all directions, blades flashed in the vehicle lights, and screams filled the night air. It was as if some collective madness had overtaken them, transforming a coordinated unit into frenzied combatants locked in mortal struggle. What the hell is happening? Jonathan demanded, turning to find Care watching the slaughter with grim resignation. What always happens, she replied softly, when we're near. Lena had stopped laughing and now sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. A thin smile played on her lips as the sounds of combat intensified outside. You knew this would happen, Jonathan realized, the pieces falling into place. This is why you were in that container. Carrie met his gaze directly. Now you understand. No, I don't understand anything. Make it make sense. A raider crashed against the observation port, face contorted in mindless rage, blood streaming from multiple wounds. His fists pounded against the reinforced material before another fighter dragged him away to resume their battle. We were engineered for a specific purpose, to quell aggression through psychochemical influence, to end conflicts before they began. But that's not what's happening out there, Jonathan said, gesturing toward the bloodbath. No, something went wrong in our development. Instead of suppressing violent impulses, we amplify them. She moved beside her sister, hand on her shoulder. Lena's effect is stronger than mine, less controlled. Outside, the fighting had reached a fevered pitch. Bodies littered the ground, yet the survivors continued their savage assault with undiminished fury. "The container," Jonathan said, understanding dawning. "It was shielded." Carrie nodded. "We were being transported to a secure facility. Raiders attacked. They didn't know what they'd stolen." "And I let you out," Jonathan finished, the weight crushing down on him. "We are not a virus," Carrie said. "We are a mirror. You look and kill what you see." A thunderous explosion rocked the station as one of the Raider vehicles detonated, sending shrapnel and flames across the battlefield. Through the smoke, Jonathan could see figures still fighting, even as fire consumed their clothing and flesh. "I didn't want this," Lena whispered suddenly, her first word since the battle began. She looked up at Jonathan with tear-filled eyes. "I never wanted." Jonathan moved away from the observation port, unable to watch the slaughter any longer. The room seemed to be closing in around him, and a headache had begun to pound behind his eyes. He reached for his mask, finding the crack had widened further, the filter barely functional now. "How long?" he asked, his voice rough. "How long before I'm like them?" "You're already feeling it," Carrie observed. "The pressure building. The anger looking for release." He was. Every sound seemed magnified. Lena's breathing, the scrape of Carrie's boot on the floor, the distant screams, all of it grating against his nerves like sandpaper. "It's worse in enclosed spaces," Carrie continued. "The effect concentrates, rebounds." "And now we're trapped here together," Jonathan said, forcing himself to take measured breaths, "while I slowly lose my mind." "Not slowly," Carrie corrected. "By morning, you won't recognize yourself." The statement hung in the air between them. Jonathan checked his weapon, confirming what he already knew. Not enough ammunition to fight his way through the remaining raiders, even if he could trust himself to distinguish friend from foe. "We need a plan," he said, struggling to focus through the building pressure in his skull. "There is no plan," Carrie replied. "Only survival. And for you, that means distance from us." "I'm not leaving you here," Jonathan insisted, though part of him, a growing part, wanted nothing more than to flee from their influence. "Your loyalty is misplaced. We don't need saving. We need containment." Jonathan paced the small room, fighting against the irritation that threatened to explode into something more dangerous. Every movement Lena made seemed deliberately designed to provoke him. He recognized the irrationality of these thoughts, but that awareness did little to dispel them. "The communication array," he said suddenly, turning to the console Kyrie had been working on earlier. "We can call for extraction, a proper containment unit." "They won't come in time," Carrie warned. "Not before you're affected beyond recovery." "Then I'll leave now," Jonathan decided. "Get clear of your influence, then call for help. Through those raiders, they'll tear you apart before you reach the perimeter." Lena had risen from her position on the floor, approaching Jonathan with cautious steps. Her earlier hysteria had faded, replaced by a lucidity that seemed almost painful in its clarity. "There's another way," she said, her voice stronger than he'd yet heard it. "The station has an emergency protocol, a lockdown system designed to contain biohazards." She moved to a control panel on the far wall before Carrie could stop her. "Activate it, and this section will be hermetically sealed. Nothing gets in or out without proper authorization codes." "I know what you're planning," Lena interrupted, her eyes fixed on Carrie. "I saw it when you touched him. You're going to let our creators weaponize us. You're choosing their plan over our freedom." Jonathan looked between them, the tension in the room shifting from his imagined provocations to something real and immediate. "What is she talking about?" he asked Carrie. "The transmission I was preparing," Carrie admitted reluctantly. "Not just to return us to containment, but to make us useful. As catalysts for the violence they want to direct." "Tell him the truth," Lena demanded, her voice rising. "Tell him what they really made us for." Kyrie remained silent, her jaw tightening. "They didn't fail in their design," Lena continued, her eyes never leaving her sister. "We were always meant to amplify violence, not suppress it. The peacekeeping story was a lie they told their financial backers." She turned to Jonathan. "They created us to destabilize populations, to turn communities against themselves. Perfect weapons. Blame the victims for their own destruction while the true cause remains hidden." "Is this true?" Jonathan asked Carrie. "She's naive," Carrie replied, but her eyes betrayed her. "The research has potential for both outcomes." "Quarantine us," Lena said to Jonathan, ignoring her sister's warning glance. "Lock us in. Then destroy the transmitter. No one needs to find us. Ever. You'd starve, Jonathan protested. We are not like you, Lena replied. We were engineered to survive prolonged isolation. Decades, if necessary. She's choosing death, Kara accused, moving toward her sister. I'm choosing peace, Lena countered. The only way we can have it? The station shuddered as another explosion rocked the perimeter. Through the observation port, Jonathan could see the fighting had reached a new level of savagery. Raiders tearing at each other with bare hands where weapons had failed or been abandoned. Jonathan studied Lena's face, looking for deception, but finding only resolution. You're sacrificing yourselves. No, Lena said firmly. We're containing the threat we pose. There's a difference. Kyrie stood motionless, the conflict evident in her expression as she looked from Jonathan to her sister. They'll never stop looking for us. Let them look, Lena replied. We were made broken. Let us be unmade properly, by time, not by becoming what they intended. The simplicity of her statement cut through Jonathan's building rage. He looked from one sister to the other, weighing options that all seemed equally terrible. Decide quickly, Lena urged. Your window of rational thought is closing. Indeed, Jonathan could feel his control slipping. The urge to lash out was growing stronger with each passing moment. His hand had drifted to his weapon without conscious decision. With a supreme effort of will, he moved to the control panel Lena had indicated. The lockdown sequence was simple, a two-stage authentication requiring only his thumbprint and a voice command. Station Emergency Protocol Alpha, he said, pressing his thumb to the scanner. Initiate quarantine lockdown. A harsh alarm sounded as heavy shutters began to descend over the windows and doorways. Red warning lights flashed, bathing the room in a crimson glow that made the sisters' alien features even more pronounced. You should leave now, Lena told him, standing impassively as the station sealed itself around them. While the main door is still operational, Jonathan hesitated, a lifetime of instincts warring against the newfound knowledge of what these beings truly were. If I leave you here, you save more lives than you condemn, Lena finished for him. Isn't that your calculus? The main entry hatch remained open, its emergency override preventing complete lockdown until manual confirmation. Beyond it, the battlefield had grown quieter, most of the raiders having fallen to each other's savagery. Go, Lena said softly, before you can't. The pressure in Jonathan's head had become nearly unbearable, a roaring that threatened to drown out all rational thought. With a final nod to the sisters, he stepped through the hatch into the cool night air. The effect was immediate, not a complete cessation of the rage, but a noticeable diminishing of its intensity. He could think again, plan, navigate. The sisters had been right about their influence. He turned back to seal the hatch, meeting Lena's steady gaze one last time. Carrie stood behind her, a mixture of resignation and respect in her expression. We opened a door that was locked for a reason, Lena said, her voice barely audible as the hatch began to close. Some doors are meant to stay closed, Jonathan replied, as the barrier sealed with a hiss of pressurization that seemed to mark the end of more than just their brief encounter. Jonathan staggered away from the station, each step bringing greater clarity as the sisters' influence faded. The battlefield was silent now, the raiders having destroyed each other completely. He picked his way through the carnage, careful not to disturb the fallen. At the perimeter, he paused, looking back at the sealed structure silhouetted against the night sky. Within those walls, two beings waited, not malevolent, not evil, but catastrophic in their very existence. His instinct to save them had unleashed death. His decision to contain them might prevent more. Some doors are meant to stay locked,